Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Rice, congratulations on your nomination, and I look forward to supporting you in this nomination. I want to applaud your stand that you have taken concerning genocide in the Darfur region of the Sudan, and I want you to know that as one senator, we're looking forward to working with you to try to change the course of events there. It's one of the top priorities I have. It's what, outside of Iraq and Afghanistan, what I hear most from my constituency about. I feel very passionately about this, and I think we should. And if we're to have any meaning to never again being something of import, then we must do more than just simply stand by the sidelines and look as things unfold in a way in which we have the ability to make a difference. In this case, that ability is not by direct intervention of the United States, but by assisting the hybrid African Union UN forces that will do the critical work to make sure that more people aren't slaughtered at the end of the day. So I know that in a paper you wrote for the Brookings institution, you said that the U.S. response has, quote, coupled generous humanitarian assistance with unfulfilled threats and feckless diplomacy. And I am wondering, with that in mind, how do we go beyond the words? How do we get the UN to move forward in a more significant way? How do you see, what are the major obstacles to transforming the UN resolutions into effective protection for innocent civilians in Darfur? You know this area well, and you have a passion for it, but now you will have more than passion, you will have power. And the question is, how are you going to use that power to make a difference?
Thank you very much, Senator Menendez. You have been outspoken in championing, as so many on this committee have, and in Congress more broadly, far more effective and robust action on Darfur, and I applaud your leadership on this. Senators, you pointed out, we're at a point in time where the proximate challenge is, in fact, even somewhat different than when I wrote that piece and I last testified before this committee on Darfur. We do now have authorized this United Nations African Union hybrid peacekeeping force known as UNAMID. It's supposed to get up to a strength of 26,000 troops. More than a year after it was authorized, it's barely at half strength and is still lacking the equipment and the helicopters and the mobility it needs to be maximally effective. That is the most proximate way that we can increase protection for vulnerable civilians. And so, in my mind, Senator, the most urgent task is to get that force swiftly up to full strength and to ensure with other member nations of the United Nations that it has the equipment and the mobility and the night capability that it needs to be able to effectively protect civilians. Now, just barely within the last couple weeks, the administration, after much internal deliberation and back and forth with the United Nations, moved to try to lift in equipment and support for an incoming African battalion. That's important, but it's not sufficient. There is more we can and should do to press the United Nations to move as swiftly as it can, to support their efforts as best we can, and clear out what has frankly been bureaucratic blockage in both New York and Washington on this subject. We can do more to actively recruit and train and prepare and equip troops that have expressed a willingness to come into Darfur and serve in UNAMID. And we need to be absolutely clear with the government of Sudan that the United Nations and the international community will not stand for its continued obstruction and delaying and prevaricating about the deployment of the UN, make its facilities available, allow equipment to move, and basically get out of the way of effective deployment. If it requires further pressure and sanctions or pressure of other means to make that happen, that is what we must contemplate. And most importantly, we need to put adequate collective pressure on the government of Sudan to stop killing civilians. It is continuing aerial bombardments, supporting Janjaweed raids of internally displaced camps. This genocide continues. And so it is time to look at the kinds of robust action that you and others, the President-elect, have long suggested with respect to economic pressure, contemplation of other mechanisms like preventing continued aerial bombardments and flights that are designed to attack civilians. And we will look at the full range of steps that we can take to strengthen UNAMID, ensure that the government is not in a position to block its effective operation, and to press for a negotiated resolution of the underlying conflict, which is at the base of this fighting and these atrocities. There will be, I am quite certain, an early close look at this whole set of issues inside the new administration. And we will give due consideration to the full range of steps that we can take because President-elect Obama, Vice President-elect Biden, Secretary-designate Clinton, and many others, including myself in this administration, feel passionately that we can and we must do more to end the genocide in Darfur.
Well, thank you for your answer. I really look for a proactive effort, and I have the expectation that we will see that with the President-elect upon taking office. Let me ask you about Iran. It poses a major challenge for the United States and its allies. It is a leading state sponsor of terror. It openly threatens the existence of UN member states, and it is working to achieve a nuclear weapons capability. And even though the Security Council has passed a series of resolutions imposing sanctions on Iran for its refusal to suspend its enrichment activity, these resolutions have not dissuaded the Iranians, and efforts to move it along have been delayed or watered down by Russia and China. Given the current circumstances, what course of action should the U.S. take at the Security Council regarding the Iranian nuclear threat? And what approach would you take to Russia and China to gain better cooperation from them in this process?
Well, Senator, this is an urgent and pressing challenge. As the President-elect has said on numerous occasions, it is unacceptable that Iran acquire a nuclear weapon. And international efforts to date have not prevented its progress in that regard. And thus we face a very serious threat to our own national security, to the security of Israel, and indeed to the security of the broader region. President-elect has been clear that we need to forge a different approach, one that combines tough, direct, and effective diplomacy with incentives and increased pressure for the regime in Iran to give up its nuclear weapons activities, its nuclear weapons program, and indeed to halt its efforts to destabilize neighboring states and its support of terrorism. What we do in the United Nations Security Council will be designed to complement that strategy. It's a strategy that we will finalize and begin to implement in the early stages of the administration. And it would be premature for me to speculate on what exactly the elements of additional sanctions and pressures might be, or indeed the elements of an incentives package. But the principles are clear. We must work urgently to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and indeed we must inject into those efforts tough, direct, and sustained diplomacy backed by pressure as needed. Now, with respect to Russia and China, this is a crucial part of the challenge. And the irony is that both Russia and China have stated that they do not want to see Iran become a nuclear power, a nuclear weapons state, and have taken some initial steps somewhat grudgingly. But the fact is we need to work to highlight our areas of common interest with respect to Russia and China on the Iranian challenge as well as others, rather than allow ourselves to be bogged down in those differences. It's not going to be easy. They have their interests and we have ours, but the President-elect's view and mine is that we need to work to test the proposition of whether we can't bring them in their interest along with us in designing a more effective approach to the Iranians that has both pressures and diplomacy brought together in service of our shared objectives.
My time has expired. I just want to note two other things. We've talked about it, so I won't belabor it here, but certainly the question of human rights and how that council works and what role we take in it, I'd like to continue to work with you on that after you're confirmed. And also the UN process on the reunification of Cyprus is something that is very important to me as well. So I look forward to working with you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for...
Thanks a lot, Senator Menendez. Appreciate it. Thank you.